everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Great Employees Matter, the podcast that focuses on employees and helping them become better employees by teaching them how to be accountable to themselves, for themselves. We also work with companies, with employers that require a little bit of help in making sure that they understand, nurture, communicate well with, and appreciate their employees. Today we have a very interesting guest, Mr. Eisen. You can call him Bob. He's given us permission to call him Bob. His name is Robert A. Eisen. He owns a consulting firm, a human resources consulting firm here in Las Vegas. He has lots and lots of experience. If you look at his bio, which would be on the card for this week's show, you'll see that he has a lot of experience, primarily in healthcare as an HR professional. But even on his tab, you won't see that he, in addition to working at St. Joseph's in California, HCA, which is a national firm, he's worked for Quest. He's worked for several healthcare concerns here in Vegas, including Sunrise Hospital and others. His family is also involved ancillarily, many members of his family ancillarily involved in healthcare. But he brings to us a very interesting perspective about the employee relationship. And because he's an HR professional, I think he's going to drop some gems on us that we haven't heard in the past. And so we're excited to have this interview with you. We welcome you as a guest on our show. We're so glad that you agreed to in short term, actually last week, we reached out to you and you said you were available today. So welcome to Great Employees Matter. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Jimmy, for having me here. Lloyd, it's good to meet you. Excited to talk about making the employee experience better and making employers better at the same time.
Great. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Toby, and he will talk to our audience for just a second, and then ask you a couple questions too.
Yeah, so welcome to Great Employees Matter. Every week, 2:00, we have this show. We talk about employee and employee relations. It's really an employee program disguised as a personal development program. You can take everything that you learn with us with you. We talk to some great guests. So welcome. Please like, subscribe, share if you like the content. We always appreciate that. That's a free way for you guys to support our channel and to help us keep bringing you great people and great guests to talk about. So with that being said, I'm not even on screen. Hold on. I'm not even on screen. So with that being said, let me bring in our guest, Mr. Bob Eisen. How are you today, Bob?
I'm doing great.
So Jimmy already did that. He already took the thunder away from me by going ahead and introducing you and asking you how you're doing and all of that stuff. So I like to throw him under the bus because he takes me left all the time. But anyway, with that being said, where are you from first? What area do you come from?
Well, like I said, I'm a native of Las Vegas, so I was born and raised here. I went all through school until college, and I got the opportunity to go to Arizona State University, and then I returned to the area where I spent a number of years as I was developing as an HR professional. And then in 2012, I branched off a bit more nationally and was based out of California. But as I said, I maintained my roots, and I would come home every weekend to Nevada. And then most recently, in 2024, I left the corporate world and established my HR consulting firm.
Well, let's talk about that before we go into your HR consulting. You were in the corporate world. What did you do in the corporate world?
Well, I had many opportunities in the corporate world. I started my human resources career fairly entry level at Caesar's Palace here in Las Vegas. And I did everything from working at reviewing job applications, which was a very different process back then. It was all paper. And then I got into compensation and benefits. And then from there, I went to a company that some of you are probably familiar with, Associated Pathologist Laboratories, where I became responsible as the Human Resources Director for all things human resources, and then we were acquired by Quest Diagnostics, and I stayed with that company for a number of years and transitioned to HCA before I moved on to some roles in California.
So pretty much your journey in the in the working world has been surrounded around HR.
Yes, it has.
Okay, so what led you into the world of human resources in the first place? Why did you even pick that as a place to start working?
Well, it's actually a pretty funny story. When I was on a break during my college time, I came back and spent some time working for labor lawyers who were friends of the family. And at that time, I was considering, do I want to become an attorney when I went to law school after undergraduate? And a couple things happened when I was working for the lawyers. While I really liked them, I realized I didn't want to be a lawyer, and I didn't want to go right to graduate school. And one of their clients happened to be Caesar's Palace. So the next couple of breaks before I graduated, I was invited to come work as some temporary fill-in help in the human resources department at Caesar's Palace. And then upon graduating with my undergraduate degree, things were a bit challenging economically, and I was invited to come back to Caesar's Palace and have a full-time role. And they afforded me some great opportunities, some great learning experiences, and I stayed with them for about 6 years before I moved on to associated pathologist laboratories.
Man, that sounds like fate to me. It sounds like that you were just in the right place and the opportunity presented itself. You were open, and that's some of the stuff that we talk about. I often coach that a lot of people, they miss their opportunities because they're just not looking, and they might appear and then they just go away. What do you think?
Well, Kobe, that's interesting because I had some coaching at that point in my life. I was coming out of undergraduate, and like many undergraduates, you really have the belief that you know more than you really do, and you're ready for things that you're not quite ready for. And when Caesar's Palace invited me to come back to work full time, like I said, the job was a relatively entry-level job in the human resources department. I was thinking, hey, I just graduated with my bachelor's degree. Why am I considering an entry-level job? My father was very instrumental in saying, you don't know what you don't know. So why don't you take the experience you had in college, which taught you how to learn, and take yourself into this opportunity and embrace it. And what ended up happening is that receptiveness to an entry-level job moved and presented many great opportunities to be exposed to things, learn quickly, and be promoted relatively quickly. So I didn't stay in an entry-level job very long, but the fact that I embraced it, I think, enabled me to realize some success from it.
Okay, so you said something before I was going to ask my last question. I got to ask this one before. You said something that was incredible to me. You said that somebody talked to you, a mentor. How important do you think mentors are in your life's journey, especially after school or college?
I think they're invaluable. I've had many mentors, and quite frankly, I still have mentors after a 30-year career. People that I've worked with and for are still people that I consult with and get advice, whether they be family, friends. Just the other day, I was speaking to the person I reported to in my last corporate job. He was the chief operating officer and chief of staff. He and I have stayed connected, and we still run things by each other from a business standpoint. He's given me some advice in terms of how I approach things in my consulting firm. So not only are they important early on in the career, I think mentors are important throughout the career.
Nice. I love it. So this is going to be my last question before I pass it off over to Jenny. But, we focus on helping employees get into a better position, and we try to talk to employers and help employers understand that the environment is important to be, operating correctly in order for great employees to to succeed in that environment. So sometimes it's both sides of the coin that you're having to deal with. So how do you balance the needs of the company with the needs of the employee, because they're both important?
Well, I think first and foremost, honesty and communication both ways is the foundation of a good relationship. And that's exactly what employment is. It's a relationship between the employee and the employer, not unlike many other relationships. And the foundation that you'll hear, whether it's a marriage, a friendship, or an employment relationship, is honest, respectful communication. And what that does is that opens up the door to be very clear from an employer standpoint. Why are we here? Why does your job exist? What is needed from your job? And what does successful performance look like? And then being supportive and providing respectful feedback, and not only helping people see where something could have been different, but helping strategize and educate and shepherd people to performing differently. If you need them to do something different, there's a collaborative way to get at that. It's not about being disrespectful, harsh with somebody when they make a mistake. That mistake can be a very valuable learning experience. And I think it's incredibly important for employers to teach managers how to manage collaboratively. And that doesn't mean that you don't hold people accountable, but you do so in a respectful way.
I think, with my experience, I was a corporate manager for 25 plus years at a high level regional management. And so one of the things that I think that you're speaking to, it is respectful. It is how you talk to people. It is how you deal with them, even when there's a challenge. It's just understanding that they're human and that people make mistakes, and use that as a learning experience, to me, has been very successful. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jimmy. Jimmy.
I'm going to jump into the healthcare side of it. We understand and appreciate your overall HR experience, but because so much of it was in healthcare, and since, to the best of my recollection, healthcare constitutes about 17% of our U.S. economy. It's higher now.
Yeah.
And people just don't realize or appreciate how much money we invest in healthcare and how important it is to our country. Obviously, there are some shortcomings, but overall, we do a pretty good job. We throw a lot of money at it. People could argue one way or the other whether we get our money out of it, but for a country of our size to be able to provide the healthcare that we do, I think is still commendable. So, what are the special challenges that you see in healthcare when it comes to the employer-employee relationship?
Well, I think there's a lot. Healthcare jobs are very challenging, and you can look at any type of healthcare delivery, whether it's dental, whether it's in the hospital setting, a rehab setting. You're dealing with people who need your services. They don't necessarily want it. And, obviously, if they want to get better, they want help, but there's probably many other things they'd rather be doing and focusing on other than health concerns. So it's a very challenging environment, and it's emotionally challenging for caregivers to consistently provide that level of service when they're dealing with people who are not necessarily at their best, or dealing with something that they would really want to be dealing with at that point. So that balance, that burnout, that having enough to do what you need to do, and sometimes that's not enough to get the outcome that you want, and that's emotionally draining. So you'll hear a lot of healthcare companies talk about providing care to the caregivers, because it's a very real phenomenon that if you don't recognize how hard it is to be a caregiver, and don't take care of a caregiver, their experience is not going to be good. They're going to burn out, and then you're going to have challenges delivering the care.
And are there special trainings or programs within the healthcare community that focus on that care of the caregiver?
Yeah, I think it's like any employer. It's what's the environment, understanding the needs, providing resources, having that communication. Certainly, as there are other challenges, you may have resources in your EAP programs, your continuing education programs that help people gain coping skills, navigate challenges, have those opportunities and those pathways to express concerns and challenges and have support from the employer in dealing with their own concerns, their burnout, their stress, but also the resources that they need and support they need to come in every day and deliver quality care.
What about when an employee makes a decision, when a caregiver makes a decision to work for a provider? Is there anything in the pre-training, when somebody's going to college or going to an institute and they want to learn how to be a phlebotomist or a radio tech, are there programs that specifically speak to the challenges of being in the healthcare community then, or is it not until they get to the facility that they end up working for that they actually get that type of training?
I think it's really more when they get into the profession, they start to acclimate with the environment. I think some employers do a better job than others in building up the resources and acclimating their team members into the environment. One of the things that we saw in the hospital environment is you bring a new grad nurse out of school, and they can have great training in nursing programs, certainly. But they still need to learn how the care is delivered at your facility. And you have to take the time, the care, the effort to orient people into that environment. And they can be an experienced nurse or other type of caregiver, having worked at other locations. But you still have to be thoughtful in the acclimation process into your environment. What tools, resources, and support do you have? What are the standards in your facility? What are the practice patterns? And make sure that people are equipped and situated and informed to come into your facility.
Yeah, I can see that the education about the environment is critical. I mean, it would be, there's a huge difference between working at UMC and not the hospital clientele, but the neighborhood, right? And having to navigate that in order to get to work, and obviously that impacts the type of patient there. It's much different than going to St. Louis, Dominican, for example. And I think that anything that the hospital does to educate the new employee about additional challenges that might come with that would be important.
Yeah, and the other element to that is it's certainly driving that connection to the organization, the mission, objectives, expectations of the organization, so that you have that shared vision. And what's important to the organization can be important to the caregiver that's working for that organization. And the better you drive that alignment and that understanding and buy-in, the other pieces come together much better as well.
I think that perhaps RAE, HR Services, and Great Employees Matter should go knock on Mason down a Howling store and say, we can help you guys out. I'll give Mason a call and suggest that.
Be glad to come with
you. Do you know Mason?
I do.
Great guy. Great guy. So he's a CEO. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lloyd because he is looking to ask some questions. Go ahead, Lloyd.
How you doing? Good to meet you, Bob. I was very excited after reading your resume and seeing that everything that you've accomplished. I have both a medical question and an HR question, and you seem uniquely qualified to address both of them. I'll go first with the HR question. In California today, many counties are increasing the minimum wage. Alameda's up to $17.46 an hour. Berkeley's up to $19.80 an hour. Emeryville, $19.90 an hour. These are higher minimum wages than I've certainly ever seen in my 67 years. How has the increase of things like we got to pay people a living wage, we got to pay people a minimum wage, how has that affected the HR field?
Well, it certainly presented its share of challenges. In California, not only are the minimum wages that you mentioned hitting new highs, probably aware that there has been an increase to the fast food worker minimum wage that was even higher than those rates that you've mentioned. And so while these locations are having their minimum wage increases, they're still not yet at the level that you're seeing fast food workers being paid. So one of the challenges for HR and other employers is competing for talent. When somebody can go work in a fast food restaurant and make $20 an hour, our wages have to compete with them. And obviously, in healthcare, most of the minimum wages are higher. But if you think about it, when you deal with wage compression, as the bottom rises, you still have to address the other levels. And so the challenge from an HR standpoint is helping the organization navigate that financially, because it does change the financial model. Jimmy and I were talking before the show that when you look at most employers that rely on labor is already their single biggest expense. So anything that affects labor costs typically will affect it at a much greater rate than any other expense that they have. And in many cases, labor represents 30, 40, 50% or more of gross revenue. So anytime you impact that, you're having a very significant impact that you have to manage. And so from an HR standpoint, partnering with your financial people, your operational people, on how to navigate and offer those appropriately competitive wages and manage that cost is certainly an ongoing challenge.
So personally, I think that I keep the healthcare system alive. I'm convinced by the number of doctors I have and the number of tests they insist on running. I figure that somewhere my chart is marked with, really, you can make a lot of money off of him. But on a more serious note, how are the hospitals and the medical fields responding to this?
Well, a number of ways. It's a matter of evaluating service lines that they offer, looking at technology, looking at scheduling, and trying to be efficient with labor costs and how they implement technology. Implementing technology probably could be a whole podcast session or series in and upon itself. It's the fourth industrial revolution. So, but I think what you're seeing is organizations looking at how do we implement technology to do things and utilize labor at the highest and best use. And are we doing it efficiently? Are we paying people to do things at their highest and best use? And where we can automate and implement technology, we do that more cost effectively. But again, also evaluating what is it that we're offering, and is it going to continue to be viable? And I think that's a concern in the healthcare space, because as you look at access to care, if there's a facility reducing service lines or changing the availability of service lines, that impacts the access to care that some people have that they need. I think we need to go further with that. But looking at all of those different levers and knobs is
I love that. Absolutely, positively love that answer, and it dovetails into my next question. Microsoft recently released a report, and I want to read part of it because I want to make sure that I get it absolutely right. Their AI program took real world cases published each week in the New England Journal of Medicine, and it showed that their Microsoft AI diagnostic orchestrator correctly diagnoses up to 85% of the case proceedings. But here's the critical part. It's a rate more than 4 times higher than a group of experienced physicians. So not only was the AI better at being able to diagnose, but it was 4 times better than the physicians, and got the basic AI got it right 85% of the time. So my easy softball question to you is, how is AI going to change the medical field? And as an HR person, do you think that that's an area where there's going to be job growth within the hospital and medical systems?
I think that's a great question, Lloyd. And, as I've been reading and certainly formulating thoughts of my own, and this isn't my own, you've probably read this, that AI probably will do many things that people have historically done, and that will continue to evolve. But while that's doing that, there are going to be jobs and work that are going to be needed from people in support of that haven't existed before. So it's really going to drive a change in not only how people work, but what work people perform in conjunction with technology. And that's part of this fourth industrial revolution. But one of the differences that I read about is it not only will make us rethink what work gets done by technology, how that gets done by technology, but it's also focusing on the concept of who we are in addition to what we do and how we do it. And so it's a very unique industrial revolution, and I think that's going to have an impact in all facets of industry. I do want to kind of comment on what you mentioned about the accuracy of the diagnosis, and I think AI is going to be a very important evolving tool. But right now, at least for what I perceive, that there's a couple of dots that need to get connected. One, it's about the clinical diagnosis, and that's very important, and the accuracy of it is obviously critical. But how that information gets delivered to the patient, and that patient navigates decisions that they will have to make, and then ultimately decide on course of action, treatment plan, and what that patient would expect, to still believe that caregiver is not yet being replaced by technology. And I think that's a critically important aspect of healthcare, is that relationship and how the patient is dealt with, and how the patient is communicated with and educated so that they can make informed decisions in a compassionate way. And that's a really important element of what caregiving does.
It's my wife and I talk about that all the time. I mean, you're absolutely correct. I'm not sure that I want Rosie, the old Jetsons robot, delivering me bad news. AI is just many things, but I'm not sure that I want to replace my doctor with some robot somewhere, especially if that's bad news. And then, just out of curiosity, I'd love to hear your take on this. Of course, here in Los Angeles, Waymo has these driverless taxis all over the place. And because I'm old and not a millennial, I have actually never been in a driverless car. And my wife and I were wondering whether or not we would have any qualms about getting into a Waymo taxi. And then you extrapolate to there, to the fact that we know that there are driverless semis already on the road. And I'd just love to hear your thoughts about that, not because it has anything to do with the subject, but you're knowledgeable.
Well, I first saw the Waymo vehicle some trips to Phoenix, Arizona. They're very prevalent there. And I actually downloaded the app thinking I was going to give it a try. I just couldn't muster up the nerve to summon a Waymo, and I did an Uber instead. But I do have curiosity about it and an interest in trying. I think it's going to continue to take shape. Uh, there's a lot of work in it. But I still have my own trepidations.
It's funny because it scares the heck out of me. It just absolutely, and my grandson is a year and a half old, and I'm thinking to myself, when he gets to be 16, will he even know how to drive? Will he even learn how to drive? Will that be a necessity? Because at the rate that this thing is going, it's growing exponentially, right?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned driving. Growing up as a kid, one of the most important things to me was my 16th birthday, getting my driver's license the day I turned 16. Kids, as the generations evolved, I was hearing kids aren't getting their driver's license until they're 18 or later. And I think that had a lot to do with technology, the cell phones and the connected gaming and the video conferencing as accessible as it is. Kids didn't need the freedom as I looked at it as a 16-year-old with a driver's license. They didn't need to go anywhere. They were interacting with their friends sitting at their computer screens. And so they were getting their driver's licenses later. There was just less interest in it. And, it's going to be interesting to see how they take, how generations continue to take to these autonomous vehicles, which, quite frankly, my trepidation, your trepidation aside, that technology is advancing and it is going to continue to take hold. And I think it's going to be very interesting.
Very interesting.
My last question, and I'll make this quick because I know Jimmy really wants us to get back on topic and talk about things that the audience actually tuned in to hear. But my last question is just for an opinion. My wife and I are going to the midnight showing tonight of Jurassic World, and I'm just wondering if you know who wins. Is it the dinosaurs or is it the humans?
Well, they've got to be able to have the next iteration. So the humans are going to come out on top, but certainly going to have bumps and bruises to show for it.
I appreciate that.
With that, we are already halfway into the hour. It's amazing how time flies, and therefore we need to reach out to our sponsor. So I'm going to turn it over to Toby to speak about our sponsor, Podcast Excellence Academy.
Oh, okay. I told you to do it, but I'll do it. No problem. We have a community that's available. It's our sponsor today. It's called Podcast Excellence Community. And what we do in there is we do teach podcast training, but we don't just stop there. In order for you to have a successful podcast, there's several things that you need to be able to have in there. So even if you're not interested in podcasting, you may need business training, you may need branding and marketing, you may need tools and things to be able to run your website, things like that, networking and personal development. We have it all in our community, and it is a $20 a month charge, and there's some great benefits to be in there. So check out our sponsor, go check it out. You can take a look, see if it's for you. You can scan the QR code on there and go right into the community and come help us either lead or get some help. And that's Podcast Excellence Academy Community. You can find them at podcastexcellenceacademy.com or just scan the QR code on your screen and get right in there and get started. Jimmy?
And you did a much better job than I would have, so that's why I let you take that. And with that, I'm going to turn the reins back over to you because I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 questions, which I won't get to. I'm going to try and get to 2 of them, but I'm going to give you a chance first.
Okay, I will love that chance. And this whole time, I didn't even know I wasn't on screen to be able to talk to the people, but that's okay. They don't like looking at me anyways.
Ooh, that's what you look like?
Yeah, that's what I look like. So anyway, back to it. I want to go back in there and ask a few questions. You helped people build long-term careers. What are some key employee retention tips that most companies miss out on?
Well, I think companies, that's very general. I think there are a lot of companies out there that do a lot of things but if you think about what it is that the employees expect, I mean, and respond to that. In many cases, they want career growth, and that doesn't mean the same thing for every employee. So sometimes people want to grow and get into management and grow, what I like to say is vertical. There are other people that don't want to be the supervisor, but that doesn't mean that there can't be career growth. We call this, or at least I call it, job enrichment. And so what are the things that can help people grow horizontally? And so really building pathways that respond to opportunities to grow vertically as well as horizontally, and using that as part of the performance management process. So it's not just about the job you have today and giving you performance feedback on how to do the job that you have today. You know, it's important to give that feedback, but also being interested in what do you want to do over the years? We want you to be here. What do you want to accomplish over the years? What does your career growth look like? Is it horizontal? Is it vertical? And then identifying that pathway that the manager can continue to come back with as they're giving performance management. But what are we doing also to develop you either horizontally or vertically in your career growth? And one of the things that I used to do is with performance reviews, we would talk about the job that they had today, but as the expectations and goal setting was, there had to be 3 to 5 personal goals tied to not only doing your job that you have today better, but what are you going to do to develop? What are we committing to? And then what can we be accountable to each other on? Because what type of development opportunities am I going to support? What type of training programs am I going to support as the employer that we can be talking about and facilitating growth? So I think creating that opportunity to be more than just the job of today, really looking beyond and planning beyond is really, I think, foundational in retention, because if there's nothing to look forward to, then what's the connection?
Yeah, and I really love that answer that you did, because I think that a lot of companies miss the ball on that, and employees really, some employees, like the climate today, they're saying that employees don't want the responsibility, they don't want to move up, they don't want to become managers or supervisors because of the climate of just the corporate world. Are you seeing that in the environment, and what are you doing in your environment to combat that?
Well, I think it's multifaceted. It's not just the corporate environment. It's the environment. Things are very challenging economically. There's a lot of uncertainty for people as technology develops, and what am I going to do? And then obviously the stress of coming back into the workplace. I personally still think that there's residual effect from the COVID shutdown. And you're still seeing companies struggle with the return to the office. And what is that really mean? And how we transition back. It was a very abrupt change. We adapted to working in a different way. People got used to it. And right, wrong, or indifferent, there seems to be a push to revert in some ways. And
Yeah.
so you're having a lot of tension there. And so there are people that say, I want to be an individual contributor because I don't want to deal with that. And it's not necessarily unique to the company that they may be working with. It's touching every aspect of life and how we're adopting technology, and what does that mean, and what are the expectations, and really getting back into it. The other thing that's interesting is you look at kids who were at home, going to school from home for a couple of years, and then being brought back into the school environment. They're still adjusting to that. And then they're bringing that into the workplace because there's a lot of things that changed as they would experience school from home, that wasn't replaced. Some of the socialization, some of the direct interaction, what that meant. You didn't turn your screen off and the person sitting next to you in class was gone. You're walking down the hall with them.
Yeah.
The same thing in the office. You finish a meeting, you leave the conference room, you're walking down the hall with people that previously you just jumped off a Zoom call and you didn't have it. So there's a lot of elements to what's going on. People wanted to do things differently.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. And I'm going to leave with my last comment. I think that things started back at the 2008 crash, especially on a business corporate level. I was a corporate manager at the time, and I watched my job go from being a supportive role to having to go in and fire people and take their keys, which was not fun or not why I signed up for the position. And dealing with HR a lot in those situations and things like that. And then you have the COVID situation right behind it. And I just don't think that we've recovered back to when I was involved heavily in the workforce, where you appreciated the work you did, you didn't mind moving up. It wasn't so tough, and the employers rewarded you for what you were doing by way of paying or other benefits that I used to get when working for some of these companies. But those things are missing now today. They're far and few between, and very few companies have that human effect, in my opinion, to where they actually care about their employees. Now it's just a number and waiting for the next person to take that place. Jimmy?
You're trying to get two of these 7 in. One is you've actually already partially answered this, but I know that, or I believe that you're affiliated with another group that focuses on incentives for employees. In addition to what you talked about just recently, what types of creative incentives are there out there now that employers should be looking at?
Well, I think first and foremost, you have to have purpose behind the recognition programs. And the individual that I mentioned to you was John Schaefer, and he introduced me to a tool that he likes to use. And it's called a recognition inventory. So basically, the organization can look at all of these different aspects. What are the opportunities to recognize employees, whether it has to do with customer service, whether it has to do with how did you help mentor somebody new to the company, or exceeded expectations, or you've had a lot of service, or you achieved a training objective. There could be any number of areas to focus on recognition, which ultimately is a way of the company saying, I recognize you as an individual. And it's not just about what you give them, it's about the act of recognizing. And so recognition takes on many forms. Sometimes when the CEO makes his way to the front line where the work is being done and takes the time to go thank people, is a very significant form of recognition. The CEO knew me. The CEO knew that I was working hard and acknowledged it.
And addressed me by name.
And addressed me by name. And so recognition doesn't always have to cost a lot of money. It costs time, it costs effort, and it costs thought. And you just plan out what are our strategies to deliver recognition in the different areas that we feel it's important to recognize and build a program around it that is monitored, measured, and managed. I think that's critical.
Well, I so look forward to working together moving forward. Final question, I'm going to go back to the beginning of this discussion. And you had mentioned that one of your first jobs was reviewing job applications at Sears. And so my question is, how has AI affected, negatively or positively, the application completion process and then the interviewer's process for determining which applicants they actually want to have a conversation?
Yeah, I'm going to address that carefully because I don't want to overly generalize. I think, first and foremost, I think there's a lot of great technology, but I think great technology still needs to be configured and set up and managed and administered properly. And so while the technology may be great, there may be learnings in how we're using it, how we're setting it up. And the reason I mention that is I don't want to say that the technology should be abandoned, but you've probably talked to people, I know I've talked to people, and I've actually tested this theory. I'm a very experienced person. I have education and credentials in my profession, and I've applied for many jobs through these systems to see what would happen. And I'm getting screened out, and I'm getting letters telling me that I've been screened out because I may be missing something. And what I'm positive of is it's missing something in my resume. It's missing something in my application. Now, one could say, well, maybe it's the way that you developed your resume, or maybe it's the way that you responded to something in the application process. And there could be some validity to that as well. But I've been very consistently just dismissed from some search processes, and I know that a human hadn't even had the opportunity to review the credentials. And so I think that there's probably cases out there where highly qualified, highly skilled and experienced people, not just me, are being overlooked for opportunities that they could be very good at. And I think it's just a matter of continuing not only to refine the technology, but it's really important for us to refine how we're configuring it, how we're understanding it, and then how we're utilizing it. And I think ultimately it will become a more and more valuable, accurate tool. Just like Lloyd mentioned, the AI learning has made significant headway in the accuracy of diagnosis of medical problems. Well, certainly the machine learning will take shape and become more and more accurate in screening job applicants. But I think there's still work to be done.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we had heard similar things, which is why I posed the question. Lloyd is not aware of this, but we have a 250, we'll push it to 255 hard stop. Mr. Eisen has another commitment that he needs to be off for. So with that, we're going to go into that portion of our program, which we call shameless self-promotion. And this is the opportunity for you to speak a little bit more in detail about the service offerings that you have for employers, and to give us how people can get in touch with you through the website, through whatever it is.
Right. Well, thank you, Jimmy. I appreciate the opportunity to do that. As we had discussed before the show, I have fairly recently left the corporate world and decided to start my HR consulting firm, which has really been geared towards the small to mid-sized employer, dealing with the complexities of being an employer. There's a lot to be considered, both regulatorily as well as strategically. And oftentimes, these smaller to mid-sized employers will do the transactional work just fine, but they're missing out on some of the opportunity that can help advance their business by being more strategic, thinking about recognition and strategy around the talent that we're going to need, the talent that we have, how do we develop that talent, how do we retain that talent, how do we build that relationship. So my firm has been set up to take the experiences and expertise that I've amassed over my career and be able to bring that on a scalable level to smaller companies who wouldn't otherwise hire somebody with my background, but they can do it on a scalable level and still have the access. And I can be reached through my website, which is on the screen, www.rahrs.com. I can be reached on the phone number that's on the website, 702-274-5567. could send a note through the website. And I look forward to being able to talk to different employers and see how that I can help them not only advance what they're doing and the success that they're receiving, but doing that by providing a better place to work and getting more out of their employees, and the employees getting more out of their experience working.
Well, our intention is to send some of those employees your way. We will do that. It is 2:50. Lloyd, I am going to turn it over to you for the purpose of gratitude, not for asking questions, but to show your gratitude for today's show to Bob Eisen, and then we'll let Toby do the same. And actually, I'm going to start because Toby's going to end. I just want to say thank you very much, Bob, for being on the show. I knew you were going to drop some gems, and you have. I think that there's going to be an opportunity for us to have future shows with you because HR will be ever evolving, and certainly with the application of AI in health, going to affect all sectors of the workforce. Then we need to have this discussion fairly regularly. So thank you very much for being on the show. You're everything that we expected you to be. Lloyd?
Yeah, I'm truly grateful for the opportunity to speak to you. As I indicated, it's a unique mix for you, right? You're very, very familiar with healthcare and the healthcare systems and how they work, and the HR. And much like a lawyer, HR is either hated or loved by the customers that it serves. Either the employees really like you or they hate you, and they can do both at the same time. It's truly amazing. So I wanted to say thank you. At some point in time, I'd love to hear your greatest HR story. I don't know if you can do it in the next 30 seconds or if you can put it in writing and we can put it on the website. But I would love to definitely learn your greatest HR story.
Well, I would love to share that with you, and I will follow up on it.
That'd be great. Toby?
And so for me, basically, I just want to say thank you for coming in. I love the topic of HR. I worked with HR for several years. I think you're doing it right. I'm happy that you started a company. It seems like you have all the right principles to be able to help both sides of the coin, on the employer side and the employee side, which is how we're set up. So I, too, am also seeing some future collaborations, hopefully in the future, that we can maybe come together. So thank you. And with that being said, anything you want to say to the audience before we cut out?
Well, I want to say thank you not only to our hosts of the podcast, but those of you who have tuned in and taken an interest in hearing a little bit from the HR perspective. We've seen a lot of recent articles out there criticizing HR as well as being supportive. So I appreciate the opportunity and the time that everybody's taken to participate in this podcast.
All right. And with that, it's been another great show. Great employees matter. Greatness, excellence, and motivation always be a gym. We're here every week, every Tuesday, 2 p.m. Please come join us. Please let us know what you want to hear. Please engage with us in the comments. It's all free. Talk to you guys soon.
Thanks, everybody. See you next week.